Hey, welcome to the dub on Masahiro Sakurai on Creating Games. This is the category compilation for Game Essence, Part 1. There's 6 ones in this video, and the first one is, The secret to fun is risk and reward. Today's topic is risk and reward, a major consideration when defining what we're calling game essence, one of the key categories I'll be covering on this channel. Since it's such a crucial topic, I'll be taking some extra time today to walk you through it. I've been talking about this subject since I went independent in 2003, so it might be a retread for some of you, so I'll try to keep things concise. So, what is this game essence? You could say it's all of the elements that make a game fun, but that's not very clear. To me, it's a game's push and pull, or risk and reward. Take this game, for example, the classic shoot-'em-up Space Invaders, a pioneer in its genre in this 1978 arcade game. It became a social phenomenon in Japan. The concept is simple. You use a laser cannon to fight off hordes of invading alien ships. The invaders, they'll move horizontally to the edge of the screen, then they'll shift downwards. If they reach the bottom, you've been invaded and it's game over. So I'm going to use this game to explain risk and reward. Your cannon and the invaders can only shoot straight up and straight down. So in the configuration shown, neither attack has any chance of actually landing. Let's call this a no risk, no reward state. Now, if you inch our cannon over just a little bit to the right, well, we're now closer to the invader, but that means we're more likely to get hit by its beams. The risk to our safety increases, but our reward is almost in reach. So if we move even closer, now we're really in trouble. The enemy can actually hit us now. Uh-oh, the risk is quite high, but we can finally actually hit the enemy and get our well-deserved reward. You have to take risks to get rewards. This push and pull is the very core of game essence. It also has a high impact on what we call strategy, which is essentially the same thing through a different lens. Game essence is the fun for managing risks and getting rewards, and strategy is how you manage those risks to get rewards. One is about mechanics, the other is about the player. But now, let's get back to Space Invaders and talk about strategy in this game. When the invaders are positioned like this is what their attack range looks like. They shoot downwards, so they can only hit what's directly below them. Note that there are safe zones under each of the bunkers. However, since the invaders move sideways, their true attack range is actually diagonal. That's because they've already moved away by the time their beams have reached the ground. Do you see it? Diagonal. Let's take a closer look. When an invader is moving to the left, well, their attack range looks like this, a backslash, meaning our cannon becomes vulnerable when it's inside of this range. If we pursue the invader from the right, our cannon will enter its attack range when we try to get close. Our risk here is very high, but our lasers can't hit the invader, so we've put ourselves in danger for nothing. High risk, no reward. But if we intercept from the left though, our cannon overlaps with the invader's attack range just as much as it did from the right. It's the same level of risk, but now this time our target is in our sights, which means we got our reward. So in other words, the best strategy is to intercept invaders, not pursue them. Play the game for a bit, and you'll feel it out for yourself. Don't follow them, let them come to you. Also, your cannon's width is key to game balance because it determines how great your risk actually is. It's more than just visual design. A different size cannon could change how deep and engaging the game is. Mechanics that vary your risk are also important to game balance, like the ability to hide halfway under a bunker. Strategy is all about using ingenuity to reduce risks and get rewards. Imagine how Space Invaders would feel with a three-way laser. It might look cool, but it probably wouldn't be the best for game design. Of course, it might be okay if enemies also shoot diagonally, or if you had limited ammo. But next, I'd like to talk about a classic technique. The Wall of Death, or Nagoya attack. If an invader reaches the bottom, it's game over, no matter how many lives you have left. In that sense, you're at extreme risk in these final, frantic moments. They're so close. But the invader's beams, they can no longer hit you. So your cannon itself is impervious to all of the risk, but you're on your last legs. In other words, the Wall of Death is a state of ultimate risk, ultimate reward. One mistake, you're invaded, but your cannon is invincible. Come on, fight. Really, it's a brilliant mechanic. I love it. Game over. But though, I do get the feeling the Wall of Death is actually a bug. When an invader fires a beam at you, well, it should start from around here, right? That's what you would think. But if you look extra close, you'll see it doesn't. The beam actually starts from a position further down, here. Quite a large gap. So if your cannon is right under an invader, technically speaking, the beam will start below the cannon's hitbox and miss it entirely. So even if it is a bug, it's fascinating that a game from this area can contain such a neat mechanic. But let's look at one more game. The timeless masterpiece, Super Mario Bros. Stomping on enemies and using them to attack is a big part of the fun of this classic. Well, let's at least start with the assumption that it is fun. What constitutes fun is subjective, so some of you might disagree and say it's boring. But let's not open that can of worms. You can't be a chef if you can't discern taste. And with games, you need to be able to sniff out what makes a game fun. Look at this enemy in Mario's path. Evil Koopas. If the two are far apart, the enemy can't possibly hurt Mario, so the risk is very low. But as Mario gets closer, the risk of taking damage grows even higher. Uh-oh, it's just a few steps away! Jump, Mario! He needs to jump to avoid the threat. But this also opens up an opportunity for Mario to attack as well. So if we jump up and stomp on the enemy when we're at the highest possible risk, that's the only time we can beat the Koopa Troopa. And therein lies the fun. The consequences for missing a jump and the difficulty of controlling Mario in midair only enhance the thrill and satisfaction of hitting it. Afterward, Mario can kick the Koopa shell and chase after it for extra points or even a 1-up. Pretty nice reward, right? But with that reward comes the risk of the shell bouncing back and hurting Mario. It's happened before to everyone, but it's a wonderfully designed mechanic. Risk and reward must be in close proximity and in the right amounts. Always look for exciting ways to link the two or add twists. That's all for this section. In past lectures, I've talked at length about game essence from various angles. Fighting games, racing games, falling block puzzlers, RPGs, strategy games, and even card games. I've explained in depth what makes each one fun, so I won't get into that here. But I do believe this line of thinking is a powerful tool for finding the fun in various games. Still, I should note, game essence, or push and pull, is just one part of a game's broader identity. There are countless other ways for games to immerse you and entertain you, not just through what I've described here. We'll be talking about that topic sometime soon. Lastly, this might come as a shock after everything I just said, but I'd like to share a theory with you. A game theory, sorry. As you increase game essence, you reduce a game's broad appeal. So in the first Kirby game, for example, I deliberately made it simpler in order to appeal to a wider audience. In any case, in this channel, we'll be defining game essence as the risk and reward found within games. So please look forward to it. That's a wrap for the first section. We're going to be moving on to part 2. Wait, stress can feel good? This is squeeze and release. Enemies show up and the player defeats them. That concept can serve as the basis for a simple game, but let's take a closer look at why that is. I'll just touch on the basics. Here we go. The funny thing about games is how they stress you out in order to then provide you relief. It's a core element of what makes games fun, but stress on its own isn't fun. But if you really squeeze a player, then whoosh, set them free, it can bring a great satisfaction to anyone. Which is sort of strange to think about, right? I mean, it's stressful, but it's still fun. It feels so good to be under that heavy pressure and then suddenly freed from all of that stress. Take Mario Maker. Objectively speaking, you might think it's more satisfying to never have any stress in the first place. Delete everything, but if you play games, you'll probably know that wouldn't be too much fun to just run across in a straight line. Stress is unpleasant, yes, but that's no reason to weed it out entirely, no. Apply stress. That's some kind. Whether that's an enemy, an obstacle, or a puzzle, all it has to do is impede the player's progress, then by releasing that stress, they'll feel great. That's just the first step. If they can pass this challenge, we want to reward the player with new ways to more effectively relieve that stress. For example, experience points, or new skills, would prepare the player to face stronger foes later on. Currency to buy better equipment is another great reward. And even just letting players progress is a reward in and of itself. But providing the player with choice can really boost that game essence. Apply stress, allow for release, and prepare players for whatever's next. By considering this flow, you might find ways to make your game even more fun than it already is. Don't just mimic the things other games are doing, though. Instead, re-examine why they do it, and you'll boost your own chances of making something fresh and innovative. Right? That's what we're hoping for. But that's part 2 done. We're moving on. Part 3, fight or flight, and that's game essence in role-playing games. There are all sorts of role-playing games out there, so here's a brief summary of the game essence found within them. To start, one thing RPGs need is an adventure into unknown dangers. The deeper you go, the stronger and scarier enemies will become. But in search for an even greater reward, you push on anyway. Do you press your luck, or do you get out while you still can? Choice is yours, but falling in battle would mean losing all of the spoils you found, so the risk and reward is very clear. Games that let you exit dungeons at will, or not stress over resource management, could be said to be more casual, like Bravely Default. But that doesn't mean they're devoid of nail-biting challenges. By increasing the difficulty of individual battles, they can still hit a nice balance and still trigger game overs. But as for combat, action RPGs have to take the balance of action scenes into consideration. So let's just talk about the turn-based battles for now. When an enemy appears, first the player sizes it up based on how it looks and how it acts. Scary. Maybe if it seems weak to fire, or if you give something a shot and it works, you gain experience. The player experience, that is. 50 damage for fire. Exploiting enemy weaknesses to maximize your damage output. That's both strategy and game essence at play. Then again, players might not always give it that much thought. For a more casual game, it might be best to just not make things too complex. In games like Persona, exploiting weaknesses let you set up the combos, giving battles a little more variety and rhythm, like the game's design urges you to exploit enemy weaknesses, which makes for a great balance. It's important to have all of that push and pull, after all. This is a holdup! Today, I've covered two core elements about RPG essence, exploration, and the combat. But RPGs are a vast and complex genre, so don't let existing conventions limit how you design your push and pull. It was a quick one, but that was part 3. Done. We're moving on. Here's number 4. Fun is infinite, and the fun beyond game essence. I'd like to make one thing clear right off the bat. A game's fun is more than just its game essence. Game essence is one part of that, yes, but games come in all shapes and sizes, and today I'll go over some of the types of games that don't purely rely on that for fun. I've got 7 examples in total. First up, games that are fun to control. Video games can provide plenty of fun purely through how they control. The world inside of the screen is free from the laws of nature, making it a mysterious and fascinating place for those of us who are out here in the real world. To create fun through control alone, you need to make apt design choices and have the skill and sense to fine-tune how the controls feel. As an aside, RC cars tap into the fun of controlling things in a similar manner. Here's number 2, the adventure games and visual novels. This genre isn't as focused on push and pull, but rather the fun that comes from watching a story unfold. While they could be seen as extensions of novels or films, a compelling story alone isn't enough to make a good game, so unlike novels, though, games can utilize interactivity with a computer, and their fun and magic as games come from building stories taking advantage of this. Of course, some of these story-based games like Ace Attorney offers a greater sense of push and pull, thus blurring the lines between genres. Objection! Take that! Here's part 3, cinematic story-focused games. This is similar to the previous category, but story elements can be incorporated into any game regardless of genre. So I think it's easy to grasp that fun cinematics or stories aren't necessarily a part of game essence. However, both can be key touches that serve to enhance it. They're a driving force that keeps players pushing onward to face risks. Plus, fleshed out characters and worlds help to deepen the player's immersion on them, creating a visceral connection to the events taking place on screen. Here's number 4, licensed games. These titles are best thought of in relation to films, toys, trading cards, just various products targeted towards fans of that given franchise. Generally speaking, it's not so much about whether a game is fun, but whether it gives fans an enjoyable experience in the world of the franchise that they love. So to put it another way, there's little point in critiquing these titles if you're not approaching them as a fan of the series. For this category, game essence really isn't the be-all and end-all. Number 5, games based on real life. These are games that recreate the intricate details of real-life experiences. Playing pretend in a simulated world can offer lots of fun beyond game essence. Take this train simulator, where your train just arrived at the station. The train doors clatter as they open. The passengers' feet shuffle as they board the train. You can hear it all clearly. All the program does is call a handful of simple sound effects, but it really does feel like the doors are opening and the people are getting on board, giving players a sense that there's a world beyond what's shown on screen. As the game approaches real life, the player starts perceiving more information that is actually shown, thus deepening the experience. Of course, you can still boost the game's essence in other titles, such as Power Wash Simulator, but I think they offer plenty of fun as is. Here's number 6, building and crafting games. It's fun enough to just make stuff in these games, regardless of the game essence. But with the right mechanics, dying if you fall from a high place, building things to defend from the enemies, or braving danger to gather materials, you can bring in risk and reward and potentially make the game a lot more fun. Incidentally, crafting games can sometimes overlap with games based on real life. They're both playing pretend. More so than even Minecraft. A great example can be found in Animal Crossing. And here's number 7. This is rhythm games. The joy we get from making sounds in time to a beat of a song comes from more of a primal place than even just the fun of a game. Humans instinctively enjoy the rhythm, plain and simple. And with this genre, the more familiar you've gotten with the song, the more fun you'll have with it. I'll stop. These games revolve around learning the songs, then matching the rhythms. It really is fun. Though depending on the design, push and pull can arise too, meaning it's possible to include risk and reward in these games too. And the Beat Mania series is a great example of this, where even if you're a hair late on hitting a note, it's considered a miss. Had they created a looser system, one that allows for goods and bads, the further past the note your timing is, there would be less risk involved and people might find it a bit boring. And that's all. There is one more genre I considered, but ultimately I decided not to include it on this list. But here's the extra. It's sports games. Real-life sports have all some kind of push and pull by definition. In making a digital recreation of that, you could say that there's already some amount of game essence in place. In addition, spectator sports work because people have teams they like to root for. In a game, that team will naturally be the one playing, and if someone roots for a team in real life and then gets to control that team in-game, they'll feel all of the ups and the downs even more intensely. Not to say that you can't innovate, but sports games already have plenty of game essence as is. And plenty of other types of games give rise to push and pull in that same virtual nation. Game essence isn't the only thing that makes a game fun. And the categories I listed here are neither strictly defined nor completely distinct. The boundaries between them, sure, they're blurry. If you can't really feel what's fun and learn how to break that down, you'll be able to accomplish an even greater range of feats. So, try to stay cognizant of that. Remember, find what makes games fun. So, deceptively friendly, it's Kid Icarus's The Fiend's Cauldron. When selecting a difficulty, most games over the years let you choose between easy, normal, or hard. This still holds true today, but for the difficulty in Kid Icarus Uprising, I created a system I called The Fiend's Cauldron. I think this was a pretty clever mechanic from a game essence standpoint, and let's dive right in. Sorry to keep you waiting. It's been too long, Lady Palutena. At the beginning of each stage, the Fiend's Cauldron appears before you. This is where you set your intensity, and the default intensity is 2.0. However, if you pour hearts, the game's currency, into the cauldron, you can really crank up the intensity. Now things get really hard up here. As the intensity increases, the game's difficulty also does. Enemies become more aggressive and have a higher attack and defensive stats than ever before, so you need to be going prepared and think about your strategy. On the other hand, you can earn much more in the process. If you can finish the stage, you'll be rewarded with more hearts, stronger weapons, and better powers too. But if you fail a stage, some of those hearts will spill out of the cauldron. That difficulty will be lower when you continue, but you've now lost some of those hearts, and it'll be more difficult to get worthwhile rewards. If you want to lower the difficulty, you can spend hearts too, decrease the intensity as well. If you bring it all the way down to 0, well, you're pretty much invincible. It's almost a guaranteed win. In terms of risk and reward, I believe the advantages of this system are clear. If you take a big risk, you can get a big reward. It's also just a novel approach to tackling difficulty in games. The system automatically lowers the difficulty when you fail, so the player rarely gets stuck. It may not completely remove the pain of failure, but it's not as bad as bluntly asking if you'd like to switch to easy mode. Throw it to the wall. And since players don't have to play the whole game on easy like in traditional games, this helps keeps the experience from feeling unsatisfying. Plus, the game is truly easy if you turn down the intensity to 0, so players won't get stuck on a section that's too difficult. Pandora's Labyrinth of Deceit. The system does embody the concept of risk and reward, but it's not without its faults. For starters, a less obvious one, It makes the game feel a bit too hardcore. A game that's constantly pushing you to your limits couldn't exactly be called casual. No. The land stages in Kid Icarus Uprising are also a little too big and have far too many enemies. So that means we couldn't make the players respawn exactly where they died, so not all of the pieces will mesh together perfectly. Game essence, push and pull, and risk and reward are great for making the experience game-like, but they can conversely make games feel less approachable too. That rings even more true on the smaller 3DS screen. I also suspect it wasn't quite clear enough that setting the intensity below 2 would lower the difficulty. Newcomers to the game are the ones who really needed this the most, and this is one of those things we didn't have enough time for during development, but in retrospect, I wish I could have done more to introduce it to beginners. Games today, generally, they let you change the difficulty wherever you want, with no restrictions for doing so. And this is honestly, obviously, it's a necessary feature. I do think that's how it should work, but part of me still wishes players could be rewarded for their stronger playing. It wasn't perfect, but I think the Fiend's Cauldron, it was a really smart feature. I'd say it offered a new way of thinking about difficulty that people can still learn from today. I'm finished. Some single-player modes in Super Smash Bros. 4 and Ultimate use a similar mechanic to the Fiend's Cauldron. Remember Classic mode? Earning points there isn't as necessary as Hearts in Kid Icarus, so it's comparatively less important. It sure would be nice to play Kid Icarus on a home console. I wonder if someone out there will ever port it. Was that a wink at the camera? Sakurai, you shouldn't have. But it's the final category. Let players cheat the system. Strategy can be defined as ways that players will minimize their losses and maximize their gains for a game. Broken down like this, I'm sure it feels like a strange definition of the word, but it makes it easier to apply the term to a variety of game genres. To reiterate, strategy is how players minimize losses and maximize the gains. It can also involve taking a larger loss for the sake of even greater gains. Try to think about strategy across the following game genres. Okay, let's list them out. We've got action games like Monster Hunter, first-person shooters like Titanfall, fighting games like Tekken, role-playing games like Final Fantasy, RTS games like Age of Empires, puzzle games like Tetris, even gambling games like Royal Casino, Video Poker. Just about any game with push and pull will also involve some kind of strategy. The thing is, games tend to be constructed in very complicated ways, and at times it becomes possible to cheat the system, so to speak. So in other words, get gains without any losses. In Dark Souls, standing in certain spots will trick enemies into falling into their death, letting you rack up lots of souls without any work. Though it's kind of tough to get footage of this. Balance-breaking situations like these are generally stamped out during the debugging process, for good reason. But letting players cheat the system can not only be fun, but it can be memorable too. Even Dragon Quest allows for things like metal slime farming, which clearly provides players with a huge advantage of infinite experience. Battles in Dragon Quest are carefully balanced, but players are able to bypass a large number of them by just farming for metal slimes and getting those criticals. Infinite experience, but still, it is fun, right? That process will really stick with players. Players will do whatever they can to cheat the system, like resetting the game until they achieve their desired results. But resetting until you win means you'll always win, eventually. But even that process, it can be part of the fun. You'll remember it. Going beyond the game. So, this doesn't apply to things like letting players rewrite the game parameters, no, but it's okay to let players cheat the system just a bit within the bounds of your game. After all, just following the path laid out before you, it's not very fun, is it? And that's 6 out of 6, which means complete! Alright, that's it for the category compilation, and thank you guys so much for watching the dub, and I'll be sure to catch you in the next one. Laters!